In the city of New York, during the darkest years of the American Revolution, the most dangerous spy in town was not a soldier. He was a tailor. He measured British officers for their coats by day and stole their secrets by night. His own neighbors believed he was a friend of the enemy. They were wrong. Twice this quiet tailor would help save the life of George Washington himself. Some people change the world, and the world never learns their name. This is without whom. His name was Hercules Mulligan. He was born in Ireland and came to New York as a small boy, just 6 years old. He grew up, studied in the city, and opened his own shop as a tailor. And not just any tailor. He dressed the wealthy and the powerful, including the officers of the British Army. It was a comfortable life. It was also the perfect disguise. Because beneath the friendly shopkeeper was a fierce believer in American freedom. Years before the war, Hercules joined a secret group of patriots who swore to resist British rule. When anger boiled over in the streets, he was there. He even helped tear down a statue of the British king, so the metal could be melted into bullets for the coming fight. In his heart, he had already chosen his side. Then a young immigrant arrived in the city, poor, brilliant, and full of fire. His name was Alexander Hamilton. Hercules took him in, gave him a place to stay, and helped him find his footing in a new land. Late into the night, the two of them would talk about liberty and revolution. The older man helped shape the younger one, and that young man would go on to help build a nation. But first, the war came, and it came badly. In 1776, a huge British force captured New York and drove Washington's army out. The city would stay locked in enemy hands for 7 long years. For most patriots, that meant fleeing for their lives. Hercules Mulligan did something far more dangerous. He stayed. Washington was desperate for one thing. He needed to know what the enemy was planning inside that occupied city. Alexander Hamilton, now serving on Washington's staff, knew exactly the right man. His old friend the tailor, the one who dressed British officers every single day. And so Hercules Mulligan agreed to become a spy, hidden in plain sight. His shop became a trap built of silk and wool. British officers came in to be measured for their fine uniforms and warm coats. And while they stood there, relaxed and proud, they talked. They bragged about troop movements, about supplies, about plans. To them, the tailor was just a servant with a measuring tape. They never imagined he was memorizing every word. But a tailor who stayed in his shop could not carry secrets to an army miles away. For that, Hercules relied on a man named Cato. Cato was enslaved in the Mulligan household, and he became the courier who slipped through enemy lines to reach Washington's men. He risked his life again and again on roads full of soldiers who could seize him at any moment. Without Cato, none of it would have worked. And here was the cruel price of this kind of war. To everyone watching, Hercules looked like a man who had befriended the enemy. Loyal patriots sneered at him. Some surely hated him, certain he had betrayed the cause. He could not explain himself. He could not defend himself. The very secrecy that made him useful also made him look like a traitor to the people he was risking everything to save. Then came the night that became legend. As the story has come down to us, a British officer hurried into the shop late one evening, needing a heavy coat. He was rushed, and he was careless. He let slip that the British were about to capture the rebel general himself. Hercules understood at once what that meant. He sent Cato into the night, and the warning reached Washington in time. Washington changed his plans and slipped away. It is hard to imagine the nerve this took. New York was crawling with soldiers, informers, and rival spies. Discovery did not mean a fair trial. It meant a rope. Every secret Hercules gathered, and every message Cato carried, was a gamble with both of their lives. And they made that gamble over and over for years. The accounts tell of a second rescue in 1781. The British had learned that Washington was about to travel along the coast, and they planned to ambush him on the way. This time the warning reached Hercules through his own brother, who did business with the British. Once again, the message went out into the dark. And once again, Washington changed his route and escaped the trap. Slowly, the tide of the war turned. The long fight ground on toward its end, and the day finally came when Britain admitted defeat. After 7 years, the enemy prepared to leave New York at last. The patriots who had fled began streaming back into the city. For Hercules Mulligan, that homecoming should have been a triumph. Instead, it became the most dangerous moment of all. Because the returning patriots remembered him as the man who had spent the whole war dining and laughing with British officers. To them, he was a collaborator, a friend of the enemy, maybe even a traitor who deserved to be punished. Everything he had risked his life to do had been done in total secret, and now that secret threatened to destroy him. And then George Washington answered the question for everyone. On the very first morning after he marched back into New York, the great general did something the whole city noticed. He walked in public to the home of Hercules Mulligan and sat down to have breakfast with him. With one simple meal in front of everyone, Washington told the city the truth. This man was no traitor. This man was a friend of liberty. There was another quiet justice, too. Cato, the man who had carried those secrets through enemy lines, who had risked just as much, had been granted his freedom for his service in the war. History would go on to remember Hercules. It would very nearly forget Cato completely. He deserves to be remembered here. In the years after the war, Hercules seemed to wrestle with the meaning of the freedom he had fought for. Together with Alexander Hamilton and others, he helped found one of the country's first societies created to end slavery. A man who had once held Cato in bondage now lent his name to the cause of abolition. Hercules Mulligan lived a long life. His shop prospered. He grew old in the city he had helped to free. And when he died, in 1825, he was laid to rest in a quiet churchyard in New York, just steps from the grave of the brilliant young man he had once taken in, Alexander Hamilton. Now, how much of this can we truly prove? Here is the honest answer. Much of the vivid detail, the coat, the late-night warnings, the daring rescues, comes from accounts passed down over the years, and the records are thin. Careful historians treat parts of the story as legend. But this much is widely accepted. Hercules Mulligan was a real and valued source of secret information for George Washington inside occupied New York. And more than once, a warning from his shop may well have helped keep the leader of the revolution alive. Think about the strange shape of his life. He spent the war hated by the very people he was secretly saving. His greatest deeds had to stay invisible, even as they cost him his good name. And the man who carried his secrets, Cato, was nearly erased from the story altogether. History almost remembered a hero as a traitor. But the truth survived. The world you live in was built by people you have never heard of. And now, you know 2 more names: Hercules Mulligan and Cato. Like and subscribe and stick around, because the textbooks left a lot out. Thanks for watching.